Good morning, everyone. My name is Harry Kimpel. I'm basically from this part of the world, which is in southern Germany. It's basically at the most southern part of Germany, at the border of Austria already. This is also, you can see in the back the mountains, my skiing area where we, go skiing with my family. I have been in software development or software, architecture pretty much all my professional career. Probably coming up on 30 years in the industry, which is, we can tell from my gray hair that I'm, seen a little bit. And I'm with the company New Relic since 2017 and, work out of remotely from my home, which is really nice. And if I'm not in front of a computer, you can imagine I like all things outdoors, hiking, biking, climbing, skiing, and so on. And we really enjoy the beautiful area around there. So before I start, I recently asked ChatGPT, based on what you know about me, and you may know that ChatGPT has some memory functions, so it remembers your prompts and anything. So I asked it, based on what you know about me, draw a picture of what you think my current life looks like. And this is the response I got. Here's an illustration capturing your developer's life, inspired by the Bavarian Alps, and so on and so forth. And the picture I got was this one here. And I thought this was amazing because, you can tell from the mountains, it knows where I am. Even the houses look very similar in my area. And what I found interesting is also that it put some, observability dashboards on the monitors, which is amazing. So, it really looks like pretty much my home office. My daughter, she's 12 now, the little one, she's like, how does ChatGPT know that you have so many monitors at home? And I'm like, I don't know, maybe it's, thinking that the developer has many monitors. Anyways, let's get into the topic. So the talk that I prepared for you today is, monitoring WordPress. And there's many different aspects that you can look into when you think about monitoring. That could be front end, could be back end, could be, the database, many things. But why should you monitor your WordPress environment? And in general, it's the technical aspects of monitoring where, you experience some slow time. The users are reporting that, the site isn't fast enough, the pictures don't load, it's slow. And the slowness can come from many areas. This could be the plugins that you installed, and maybe they are slow and they add on the load time. It could be the database connection, and maybe you have, less, database pools, and, your requests to the database are slow for some reason, or you're missing some indexes on the database. It could be the infrastructure, like the underlying host, whether you deployed it on a virtual machine or on a host. It could be the CPU, the memory, a lot of things. It could be network problems for your end users. Maybe they have issues in their network. So various aspects. It could be what we also see often is, large assets on the page, really big images that your users or your, authors deployed on the posts, or many other things. Broken links, maybe if you work with your site for a long time, maybe, throughout the time, there will be links that are not available anymore. And this could also happen. So ideally, you should observe what is happening on your WordPress environment. And, many things can happen. And then the question is, what should you be monitoring? And of course, first of all, there's the WordPress application code, written in PHP, and you ideally want to get some insights into what is happening within PHP itself. And I show you later a couple examples on what type of insights you can achieve when looking into the WordPress application code itself. It could be your own custom code. Maybe you added to your own code, your logic from a front end or back end. It could be plugins that you deployed. So many different things. And so ideally, you should also observe all of the plugins that you use on your page. It could be, like I said, the underlying infrastructure, the host and the servers. What else? The Apache, the web server, typically Apache. It could, the database in general, like a MySQL or MariaDB. And the end user experience. So you want to also, see how is the end user experience for your site, for your end users. And also what else you should be looking at is in some of the business aspects. We typically think about when, starting monitoring about the technical aspects and some issues and exceptions that occur. So kind of like the negative aspect of monitoring, if you will. But there could also be the positive aspects of like the business objectives. How many users do you have? Where are your users accessing your site from? What is the content that is most popular on your page, and so on and so forth. So also you could derive a lot of business metrics, business objectives from monitoring that you use when looking into the monitoring aspects and what it is you should be monitoring. And then how can you monitor this? Of course, I'm from Relic, and we have great support and tooling for WordPress available, and you can use that. We typically use agents that you deploy in your WordPress environment, agents for the backend, agents for the front-end code, so real user monitoring agents, or also for the infrastructure. There is also this concept of open telemetry, and I'll get into this and highlight what open telemetry is. And there's various other forms of monitoring available. There's even some plugins that you can use to ingest into your WordPress environment and use them. I will be focusing on the first two aspects using open telemetry and New Relic capabilities that I show you, and what results you can achieve by using them. So first of all, when we think about monitoring, there's typically kind of like some signals, some telemetry that you capture. And the telemetry that you typically capture is traces, so kind of like an end-to-end request. When you have your users accessing your page, you maybe have multiple microservices, the database, and so on. So how can you trace an entire request from your users end-to-end, from the front end, from the mobile app, from the end-user device, all the way to the database where your content sits? We also typically look at metrics, and metrics are kind of like already pre-aggregated types of information. It could be the average CPU in the last hour that you used, the throughput of your site, how many users are accessing your page, or even like the max memory that is being used in a given time window. So these are already pre-aggregated data, and they show you some high-level information about your environment, again based on back-end data, front-end, or even real user data. And then lastly, you also, and this is probably the most familiar to all of you, is the logs. So you have WordPress debug logs that you can use, and this is typically like an event that happened, and you can trace all the information back to your end-user behavior. So traces, metrics, and logs are typically the signals that you capture from monitoring. Especially when it comes to distributed tracing or tracing in general, I wanted to define a couple terms here. So think of this as like you have maybe multiple services talking to each other. This could be service A could be like your front end, your HTML code. Then you have a backend, maybe an API or your WordPress site, and then finally maybe a service C that could be, for example, the database. So when you think about how much time is spent in this entire trace, you can then see how much time is spent in the service A, service B, and service C. And then the overall time, this is the bar that I added on top of it. This is kind of like the trace. So from a terminology perspective, the trace is what you see end to end, all the way from the beginning to the end. And then you have different spans, and this is typically different sections within your trace. So why is this important? I'll have an example that I show later on, on how we can get visibility into what is happening behind the scenes. And if your site is slow, where is it exactly slow, and how can you dive deeper into the different aspects? And so how does typically monitoring, how can this happen, right, behind the scenes? So what typically happens is that the agents that you deploy, or when you use open telemetry, when you make that call from service A to service B, there will be some so-called trace context automatically injected into the request. Imagine this is an HTTP request from service A to service B. So what typically these agents or open telemetry does is it injects this W3C trace context into the header of this request. And then on the service B side, this will then look for this trace context, and if it finds a trace context as part of the header information, it will continue that trace from that point on. And same happens for service B to service C. This could be like a gRPC call or some other form of communication. And again, this will always inject this standard into the request. And this way you can then trace an entire request all the way from the beginning to the end. So this is really important when it comes to monitoring your application, and especially also in WordPress. So what we do at New Relic, and this is a link that brings you to like a starting page. We typically, like I mentioned, use agents that we deploy into your environment. You typically need root access in order to deploy these, because they will be injected into the PHP and the Apache web servers. So we have an agent running as part of your application code that captures all the telemetry, the traces, metrics, and logs from your WordPress environment. And then it uses a PHP daemon also to capture the data and then send it off to our backend. Relic itself is a pure SaaS service. So you will not be able to deploy this locally in your environment. It's a pure SaaS service. But then you can analyze the data, look at, the trends. You can set up alerts for your system and get all the visibility that you need all the way from the database level to your application code and so on. We have really nice pre-built dashboards focusing on WordPress specifically that you can use to get visibility and insights. So, show of hands, how long do you think it will take to get everything up and running, like in hours? How many of you think it takes more than 4 hours? More than 1 hour, maybe? Okay, couple show of hands. So it's basically less than 2 minutes to deploy all of this. I captured this video from an installation process, and this is 4 times speed, so it takes this took in total 1 minute and 50-something seconds to install everything. And what happens behind the scenes is it will install the infrastructure agent to deploy on the host itself, which will capture telemetry from the host, the virtual machine, your underlying infrastructure. It deployed a logs integration to capture all the logs from your server. This could be PHP or debug logs from your WordPress environment, but also logs from your system, and so on and so forth. It deployed a PHP agent for your application, and on top of it, it identified also that you have some Apache web server running, so it deployed an Apache integration on your server. It noticed there's a MySQL running on the system, so it deployed a MySQL integration. And finally, also for your benefit, it also created some so-called golden signal alerts. So basically, some alerts that are typically something you want to observe and get notified of if something happens. And these golden signals are typically, the throughput of your site, whether that changes. It could be the response time of your application. And these are all deployed. So it takes really less than, a couple minutes to deploy all of this and then get visibility. The other topic that I want to share about today is OpenTelemetry. Who has heard about OpenTelemetry before? Okay, only a few hands. So I mentioned it already. So we have typically some signals from your application when you capture monitoring data. And these signals are metrics, traces, and logs, as I mentioned. And there used to be 2 different standards out in the industry: Open Tracing, that focused purely on the traces, the tracing aspect; Open Census, which was focusing only on the metrics. And Open Tracing, OpenTelemetry is really a standard now as part of the CNCF Foundation, which captures all of the signals, metrics, traces, and logs from your services from a variety of environments. You can use different language agents for PHP, but also for other agents, .NET, Java, whatever it is you use. And it captures the data in an open standard fashion. It uses a standardized protocol called OTLP, Open Telemetry Line Protocol. And then it captures the data in a vendor agnostic way. As I mentioned earlier, the agent deployment that I shared, which took less than 2 minutes, it will deploy some New Relic agents, and they are really optimized. And we are started this in almost 20 years ago. But OpenTelemetry really comes into play, and this is, in my opinion, will be the future of capturing telemetry. It captures them in an open standard fashion. It's vendor agnostic. You can define OpenTelemetry environment and then choose where you want to send the data to. You can, of course, also then export the data that you captured using OpenTelemetry into New Relic. We have an OpenTelemetry endpoint that you can use. But really, the purpose is, and the main advantage is, it is an open standard, and it doesn't lock you into any vendor conversations. And then OpenTelemetry, in contrast to what we do at New Relic installing agents, they use composer packages. So if you don't have access to your root environment on your system, you may be able to deploy these composer packages on your environment. And this is what OpenTelemetry uses. They also have SDKs and the exporter to export the data, and really allows you to also capture the data from your system in a vendor agnostic fashion. And the link will bring you into the starting or to homepage of OpenTelemetry auto instrumentation. Okay, so that's all great, but show me what is it that I can achieve by using monitoring? And first of all, I cover, different aspects. One is covering the front-end monitoring aspect. And what we do is by installing these agents, you will then automatically get visibility into your end user behavior. We refer to this also as real user monitoring. And you can get then, the core web vitals from Google that they defined, like the largest contentful paint, the interaction to next paint, and so on and so forth. So these metrics will automatically be captured and visualized, and you can look at the trends over time. How is my page performing from a front-end perspective? So like I mentioned, the 3 different metrics that you can achieve here. Second of all, from a front-end monitoring perspective, you can also, of course, look into what does the page load time look like and where's the time spent. So we even, break it down into different sections like, the DOM processing, networking aspects, and you can, directly see where is the time spent. If I have like an average, response time of 1.5 seconds, where is the time spent and why is it slow? Is it on the server side? Is it on the, backend side? Why is it slow and where is it slow? You can even break it down into sections like on the front end and the backend code. So this is what you see here in blue is basically what actually happens inside of WordPress, and then the green one is actually the front end, whatever happens in the browser from your end users. So really nice way to break it down and see, if it is slow, why it is slow, and where do you have to support it. We also provide automatically these geo maps. So we show you on a page, based on the load time, for example, where in the world is your site being used, and if it is slow in some parts of the world. For example, you can see in Australia, the site is specifically slower than in other parts of the world, and this may be due to networking perspective. The site is deployed in Europe, so it makes sense that it is a little bit slower in Australia compared to like other areas in the world. So really give you in perspective, and you can drill down and filter all of the different aspects based on the countries and the location of your end users. Then if you think about the backend monitoring, similar to what we have seen on the page view load time, you can also capture this on the backend side. So this breakdown that you see here is basically then a breakdown on the backend, so purely focusing on the PHP WordPress environment. The blue section here shows you the PHP execution time. The yellow one is time spent in the database. This could be requests to your database. And if it is, slow, is it, you exactly know where to look at? Is it the database? Is it your application? Do you need to scale your environment and so on and so forth? What's nice about this as well is, and this is like a peak that that we see here, at some point the site was really slow, right? And I can correlate this information directly with the number of requests that I have. And why is this important? Because I can see, my requests, my users on the site were basically pretty much stable, but still I had this spike on the response time. So this already tells me that it is not like a scaling issue or some other issue. It must be something on the server that is happening. I can look into all of the transactions. So we break down all of the different transactions. So the PHP requests that you see on the login, the dashboard, the index PHP, and you can drill down on that perspective. We show you the database calls that are happening behind the scenes on what database calls are being made and how often and which of those are slow. We show you information about the hooks in WordPress. So what are all the hooks that are being used? Again, all based on a certain time window that you select. You can then see which of the hooks are slow, why are they slow, and can drill deeper into the aspects. And then also I mentioned the tracing aspect. So in this example that I show here, it's not like a huge distributed trace. It's only like 2 servers or 2 services that are being involved. One is the actual the PHP WordPress side. The other one is the database. But you can see the breakdown of this request in this example took like 300 milliseconds. And why is it slow and where is it slow? You can drill down exactly to this database call at the bottom. And if we drill deeper into this, we can then see what is actually the database request, the query that you send to the database. I mentioned it already. You can also, of course, focus on some of the business metrics. You can look into what are unique visitors on the page, draw this over a diagram as well over time. You can look into and break it down on devices, device types being used. Is it desktop or mobile user? What browser version are they using? You can break down on what are the most important posts being used and why and when do they occur. What are the most active users for my app admin side? So what are the authors that are using the page most often, and so on and so forth. So I hope I was able to show you some aspects on why monitoring is important, how you can achieve it, and what it is you want to monitor ideally. Have a look into OpenTelemetry. I think this is a really nice standard that you should use, and in my opinion, is the future of monitoring. And then some aspects of technical aspects, the end user experience, and some business information that you can receive out of monitoring your WordPress environment. And with that, thank you very much for your attendance.